On this episode of SSPT's Game Day Analysis, we're going to dive into the 74 kilo weight class from 2023 IPF Classic Worlds in Malta. This was without question the most dramatic and probably the most exciting of the men's classes. We had the return of the 74 kilo GOAT, arguably the greatest of all time in men's classic division. We had an up-and-comer from Sweden, the junior world champion, and we also had a return competitor from New Zealand who traveled all the way around the world and dropped down a weight class to actually perform better. We had world records in play in the squat as well as the deadlift. High drama, high stakes, controversial calls, overturned calls. This weight class had it all. Potentially the story of the competition, at least on the men's side. As always, if you're interested in the way that I do things and SSPT does things in terms of game day coaching, check out the link below for my game day coaching manual. Meanwhile, sit back and relax, enjoy the analysis, like, comment, share the video, and as always, thank you so much for watching. As always, we will start with our nominations. This game day analysis video is going to focus on the #1 ranked competitor from the United States of America, Taylor Atwood, coming in with a 777.5 kilo total. Carl Johansson of Sweden, ranked 4th at 754.5, as well as Tim Monigatti from New Zealand, who is ranked 6th. Unfortunately, we are not going to focus on the other lifters because, quite frankly, they were not relevant. Unfortunately, Kjell Backlund, who is ranked here on nominations #2 from Norway, his qualifying total for this competition was performed as an 83 kilo lifter. So he was relegated to lifting in the B group and therefore was not a factor in this competition. And the other competitors here who are ranked 3rd and 5th and so on and so forth, respectively, quite frankly, did not lift up to the same standards as the other competitors and were not really truly in the mix for the podium. So as always, we're going to focus our efforts on those who make the podium. And I know I sound like a broken record here, but let me repeat, the nominations do not always hold true to form. They are not written in stone. So just because certain lifters are ranked above others does not mean that that's how it's going to shake out. Players make plays, lifters make lifts. They have to go out, they have to select the appropriate attempts along with their coaching staff and execute. So this is an extremely exciting competition. I'm looking forward to sharing my analysis with you, and let's go ahead and dive into our scouting report. We'll start our scouting report with the one and only Taylor Atwood from the United States of America. This guy is a close personal friend of mine. He certainly needs no introduction and no additional praise from me, but I'll go ahead and give him some. He is without question the greatest of all time, 74 kilo classic drug-tested powerlifter, and arguably the greatest of all time in the men's classic division, period. He literally and figuratively checks all of the boxes in terms of absolute strength, pristine execution, phenomenal technique, champion's mindset, an all-around good human being. And oh, by the way, he knocks just about every single metric, pound for pound, dot score, Wilks, good lift points, you name it. He owns them all. And so with an 838.5 kilo total, he is quite simply, this is, the greatest and strongest powerlifter at 74 kilos we had ever seen. Now, having said that, he's not in top form. He has been injured, and so he is not at full strength, but he's on the mend. His arrow is pointing up. Last competition was Sheffield. That's why we see the lower, if you will, if 777.5 is a low total at 74. We should all be so lucky. But having said that, that's why his numbers are down. But I would anticipate that he would be circa, an 800 kilo total if the stars align. We should not expect to see an 800 plus total out of Taylor. But being the competitor that he is clearly the favorite and is always going to be a factor in the conversation. Ranked number 2 is Carl Johansson. We're going to refer to him as Carl in this video because I believe that's how it's pronounced. He is the reigning 2022 IPF Junior World Champion, has a tremendously high rate of adaptation. This guy totaled 717.5 at Junior Worlds last year, and then increased his total to 731 kilos at Euros, and then jumped up again to 754.5 at his last competition, which was, I believe, the Swedish Nationals or a Swedish Classic qualification series for Worlds. So, we can see that given those almost quantum-like leaps, especially at this body weight for this weight class, we should anticipate something, in that 775 plus range for Carl. The world record deadlift is certainly in his sights. Deadlift training has been on fire. He's got a PB here of 316 kilos, and the world record deadlift is currently 322. So unquestionably has a shot at that. He's arguably got the best game day coach of this session in his corner, if not the greatest game day coach in this session. Certainly one of the greatest I should say the greatest of all time, or arguably, she would be in my top 3. Carl Arvidsson of Sweden. She is just plain and simple a phenomenal game day coach, and I would put her in my top 3 game day coaches in the entire world. Last but certainly not least here, we've got Tim Monigatti from New Zealand. This dude has traveled the furthest. The Kiwis always do. He placed 5th last year at 2022 IPF World Championships in the highly talked about showdown that he was supposed to have with Delaney Wallace at 83 kilos. It just didn't pan out. Wasn't able to execute the standard. Had some high squats and some controversial calls. And anyway, long story short, Tim has dropped down to 74 kilos from 83 and is quite frankly looking better and better than ever. He did a 792.5 mock meet in his own gym on April 23rd at a body weight of about 75 kilos. So I think that kind of set the figurative ceiling of what we might be able to anticipate. But it's always different when you travel and when you actually have to compete against people and make lifts under the strictest of conditions. His last competition wasn't a great one, 5 for 9, but registers a 732.5 total. Certainly potential there in the squat and deadlift to snag some world records. So this is undoubtedly going to shake out to be a fun competition. Let's dive in. Before we take a look at our videos, we always take a look at the score sheet. What do the data say? Well, here's the prognosis, or the forecasted total based on openers. We've got Carl Johansson. He's going to open up first in the squat at 252.5. He'll be followed by Taylor, and then, of course, Tim Monigatti. We always, as game day coaches, take inventory of body weights and lot numbers. So Carl has the lot number advantage, the highest lot number at 27. Really probably doesn't need it because presumably could potentially be pulling last there anyway. But nevertheless, he's got the best lot number. Tim Monigatti would have the second best lot number. And then, of course, Taylor, has the worst lot number at 7. Callie also has got the body weight advantage, man. So he's got 3 ace cards up his sleeve right from the jump. He's got, lot number, he's got body weight, and he's got world record deadlift capability. Having said all of that, if we take a look at his openers, on Prognosis, he's checking in at a 715 kilo total, which currently, before the start of competition, puts him in 3rd place. Taylor and Tim are tied on openers, but Taylor, being slightly lighter than Tim, is currently being ranked in first place with a 730 kilo total on openers, and Tim is right there with him. So without question, as you can see, this is going to be tight. The race for the podium and the shakeout of the top three positions are just going to be absolutely unbelievable. You're in for a hell of a show. Let's take a look. Sweden's Carl Johansson is going to begin the squat series at 252.5. That's 556 pounds, coming out for his opening attempt, and hits that comfortably with a significant amount of speed. Then we've got Taylor Atwood from the United States on 255 kilos. That's 562 pounds, definitely in Taylor's wheelhouse. A bit of an interesting scenario here where he's told to replace the bar. That becomes an issue later. So presumably when that happens, you've got soft knees. So the clock is running down, and Taylor, matter of factly, gets the command with a few seconds left. But again, opens light enough and smashes the weight, coming up with a lot of confidence. Tim Monigatti opening on 267.5. That's 589 pounds after traveling from New Zealand, and a very deep and comfortable opener for Tim. A lot better than what we saw last year with him getting some high squats called. Carl took a 10 kilo jump to 262.5 for his second attempt. And looks like a comfortable lift. Had to struggle a little bit. Taylor, coming out for his second attempt, took a 15 kilo jump up to 270. So 595 pounds for Taylor for his second attempt. This time gets the start command, or the squat command, I should say, and hits that. A speedy lift there. Tim Monigatti for his third jumped 10 on 277.5. This is 611 pounds, which certainly puts him close to the world record. Carl, for his third, only jumped 5 kilos. He's at 267.5, and a sticky, really good attempt call there from Carl Arvidsson of Sweden. Outstanding number for him. He's fired up, 3 for 3. Now we've got Taylor Atwood. Went up 7.5 kilos. He's at 611 pounds for his third squat. Good attempt call there. May have had 2.5 more, but a little bit sticky. And oddly enough, does not get the call. That lift was turned down on soft knees and became an extraordinarily controversial call in the championships, where he did not get credit for that squat. Tim Monigatti on the world record at 283.5, hits it with room to spare, and now he's got a chip advantage in his pocket heading into the bench press. Tim Monigatti from New Zealand is our leader. He is opening up with the lightest bench press of 165 kilos, 363 pounds, and a solid opener from Tim. Carl Johansson on 170, which is 374 pounds. And quick work of that. This is where Taylor can make up some significant ground. He's opening up with over 400 pounds, a 182.5 kilo bench for Taylor. Self-lift off and smashes it with room to spare. That's easy. I anticipate a 10 kilo jump from Taylor. Taylor's in the lead now. Okay, so Tim only went up 5 kilos, so a very modest increase. 374. And kind of grinds through and sticky there at the top. But he retakes the lead just by a kilo advantage. Now we've got Carl coming out for his second. And he went up 7.5 kilos, so we're looking at a 391-pound bench press from Carl. Big arch there for a 74. And a little bit slower, but a good call there and a good lift. And so now we've got Taylor coming out for his second. As I said, there's his dad shouting words of encouragement. Scott Atwood is with Taylor at all of his competitions. He's the hype man. And Taylor makes quick work of 192.5. 424 pounds, which again puts him back in the lead. And you can see he's pretty fired up. Tim Monigatti decides to time out and not come out for his third bench press. So he did not take 172.5. We see legendary game day coach over there clapping and giving words of encouragement. That's Carl Johansson. And we've got Carl here, Johansson, who just went up a few kilos and makes good work of his third attempt. And he's fired up. This kid's got a lot of moxie. And so he's 6 for 6 going into deadlifts. This is an important lift for Taylor. His third bench press attempt at 197.5, 435 pounds. Taylor goes with the self lift-off. And bam, good attempt call there. Pretty sticky third attempt. And Taylor has a 14-kilo lead going in to the deadlifts. Taking a look at our standings at Subtotal. Taylor Atwood is currently in the lead with a 467.5 kilo subtotal. Missed the third squat, wasn't given credit for that. Arguably the call of the championships. The squat looked pristine. I have watched this thing on video time and time again. I see absolutely no issue whatsoever with his knees. The depth was on point. He executed to standard, and quite frankly, I just don't know what the jury and the judges were looking at here. But you can't cry over spilled milk. It is what it is. It's competition. Ostensibly, Taylor didn't meet the standard and certainly didn't impress the people that he needed to impress, and that's judge and jury. So it doesn't really matter what the coaches think, what the fans think, what the audience thinks. He has to execute to standard, and according to those 6 people, he did not do that, and that's potentially going to come back to haunt him here later in the competition. It's a 7.5 kilo swing, and that he really could have used to have a higher a higher subtotal here. So having said that, when we take a look at the other 2 competitors on subtotal, we've got Carl Johansson, who is behind him by 17.5 kilos at 450. And then not far behind Carl is Tim Monigatti, who now has a chip, a world record chip to play with and in his pocket, so to speak. Opted to not come out for the third bench. Clearly, he and his coaching staff thought that the 170 was too challenging, and presumably doesn't want to waste the energy. Sometimes when you are arching really hard and creating a lot of leg drive, you can put a lot of stress on the lower back. And being a good deadlifter, I think that was probably in their mind's eye what they were thinking of in terms of just not taking away from their deadlift. So again, the standings at subtotal, we've got Taylor Atwood in the lead, Carl Johansson in second, and Tim Monigatti in third. However, when we go ahead and we look at the prognosis now, okay, again, that's factoring in prognosis or forecast. That's factoring in the opening deadlift. So after the opening rounds of deadlift, you're going to have Taylor still in first place. Tim will move to second, and then Carl will be in third. So that's why we've always got to factor in as coaches. It's nice to be in the lead at subtotal, but more importantly, where are things going to shake out, and where might things change after the opening round of deadlifts? A last-minute deadlift change came in from the Swedish team, and they bumped their deadlift opener, Carl Johansson, from 292.5 kilos, right? So that's a 644-pound deadlift. They were being coy, and that looked like a low opener to me. And Carl Johansson is known for being very crafty and playing the game. And bumped the opening deadlift up 12.5 kilos. That's 27 pounds. So now all the way up to a 672-pound deadlift, which is going to shake things up a bit. You'll notice that's going to draw him a lot closer on prognosis total. So he will now be pulling last instead of second. And that is really going to change things in terms of how the deadlift action shakes out. So let's take a look. All right, we've got Taylor coming out. He's in an unfamiliar position here, opening, leading the pack there with an opening deadlift of 292.5, but he looks to be fired up. That moved very nicely. Tim Monigatti is coming out for his opening deadlift on 297.5 kilos. That's 655 pounds. Likes to wear the belt kind of high. And yeah, he makes quick work of his opener as well. Now we've got the youngster, IPF Junior World Champion, with that double overhand hook grip, Carl Johansson, Sweden. And wow, did he make quick work of 305 kilos. And now closing the gap behind Taylor. He's only 5 kilos. So Taylor took a 17.5 kilo jump to 310 kilos. This is 683 pounds, still in his wheelhouse. And yeah, a very solid second attempt from Taylor. He's excited about that. That puts him on a 760 kilo total. This is 315 kilos, 694 pounds from New Zealand's Tim Monigatti. And he is trying to position himself for that vital third attempt. And yeah, he makes a comfortable looking second attempt as well. And so we've got a seesaw battle here, back and forth. Carl Johansson coming out on 320 kilos. That's 705 pounds. Has this double overhand hook grip. A lot of tension on the bar. And yeah, makes quick work of that one. A little wobble at the top, but we're allowed to let the bar settle. Now that the second round of deadlifts are complete, I want us to take a look at this interactive score sheet to help explain where everybody is sitting on total currently and strategy going into the all-important third attempt. Let me start by saying that one problem, if we want to call it that, is that a lot of these score sheets and databases after the fact don't reflect deadlift changes or changes of attempt, changes to openers, etc. And that would be a very valuable tool for coaches and lifters going through results, would be able to see what the attempts submissions were, what the changes were, when they occurred, and how many changes were used. Unfortunately, unless you were watching it live, which I was watching the competition live, as many of, I assume, my listeners also watch the competition live. However, it's just really hard to remember exactly what all the changes were. As I said earlier, before we got into the deadlifts, Team Sweden, Carl Johansson, they did bump his deadlift opener up from 292.5 up to 305. So a significant increase in deadlift opener. So they were projecting a much higher deadlift for Carl. And, Karo Arvidsson, being a savvy game day coaching expert and seasoned veteran of the powerlifting game, I figured that she would be very coy and submit a fake deadlift opener to kind of coax the competition or lull them to sleep and thinking that they had more of a lead than they had. But anyway, suffice it to say, Team Sweden bumped the deadlift opener up to 305. And here we are looking at the standings after the second round of deadlifts. So far, every lifter in contention here, the top three, have made their first two deadlifts, and that's fantastic. That's what you want to see. You want to see the lifts or the competition come down to the third round of deadlifts where people are jockeying for position, and may the strongest powerlifter and the smartest and the one who executes the best and picks the best attempts, may that person win. And so currently, after the second round of deadlifts, Taylor Atwood is sitting on a 777.5 total, and he is in first place. In second place is Carl Johansson, sitting on a 770 kilo total. And then not far behind him is Tim Monigatti from New Zealand in third place. So Carl, just matter-of-factly, because he has the highest lot number here at 27, that's an ace card for him. He is going to be able to play his cards last. He went last in the opening round, last in the second round, and presumably because he's got that lot number, because on the day it certainly seems like he has the highest deadlift ceiling. His deadlift prep went really well. His rate of adaptation, as I said, is extremely high. And so he's matter-of-factly just in this wait-and-see game. Whatever Taylor puts on the bar and makes, he's going to adjust, and he's going to follow Tim because Tim is going to follow Taylor, and so forth. So I just want to run through a couple of scenarios here to show kind of what, presumably the lifters were thinking. Now, in the spirit of transparency and full disclosure, as I mentioned at the start of this analysis, I am friends with Taylor Atwood. I am also very close with his programming coach, Jason Tremblay and Ben Escrow. And specifically, for what it's worth, I think the world of them, and I don't think that there's anybody in this world that does powerlifting programming better than that duo. They are the dynamic duo. I think Jason Tremblay, matter of factly, is the best. And if he's not the best, he's certainly in the conversation for the top 1, 2, or 3 powerlifting coaches in terms of programming in the entire world. And I firmly believe that. So I trust his rationale. I trust his reasoning. I trust the data that he has gleaned from Taylor's training, so on and so forth. They also had legendary game day coach Arian Kamisi working with them, working with the national team for USA in the back, helping. And so I was texting Jason Tremblay back and forth because he was asking my opinion and asking me to follow on the score sheet. And so after Taylor's second deadlift of 310 kilos, 683 pounds, all of us, universally, we were actually unanimously, myself, Jason, Taylor, and Arian all thought that his upper limit was approximately 12.5 kilos. So we're looking at a 322.5 deadlift on the third. They didn't want to take 322.5 because that is a normal increment. The world record in the deadlift going into this competition was 322. So they were discussing possibly taking 323 kilos. So if we add 323 kilos and punch that in, that takes Taylor's, he's currently sitting on 777.5, but if he makes the 323, we add that to the subtotal and we get a prognosis of 795. So that is if Taylor's lift that is if Taylor's third deadlift is successful, he would finish on a 790.5 total, which would mean that Tim Monigatti, he did a 315 kilo total. If he wants to go after first place, he needs to get to 791 kilos because he is heavier than Taylor here. So his coaching staff would be looking in that and saying, okay, if Taylor makes 323, then we're matter of factly going to have to put in 334.5, which would be a world record. 337.5 to get him to a 791 kilo total, right? And to overtake Taylor by 0.5 kilos, the absolute minimum to beat him because he's heavier. And then, of course, Carl would be watching that, and if Tim were successful with his final attempt, then Carl would have to call for 341 kilos to tie Tim and beat him on body weight because he's lighter, okay? So that's kind of the calculus that's taking place, and that's if all 3 lifters make their third attempts, right? So Jason Tremblay and myself and Arian and Taylor were thinking, look, if we need to push Carl to the absolute limit, his deadlift is on fire. He made the second one comfortably, but if we make 323, that is going to push him to 341 to go for the win. And quite frankly, I didn't think he had 21 kilos over his second attempt. And, it's easy for people to say, yeah, I had the 21 kilos. I don't know how Carl felt. I did listen to his, podcast on King of the Lifts, and I know that he felt like his ceiling was very high on the day, but it's hearsay and speculation to say that he would have had 341 kilos. He certainly, as we're going to see from the video, made his third one comfortably and had room to spare, but I'm not certain if he had an additional 21 kilos over the 320. So the safer play, if there is one, is for Taylor to take the lower hanging fruit and go to 320. That would have been a safer play and would have put him on a prognosis total of 787.5 kilos, which means that Tim would have had to get to 788, which means this would drop to 334.5, and he would get to 788. And then, of course, Carl would have only needed 338 to get to 788. So those are kind of the numbers. So basically, Taylor was in the unfortunate situation of having to go first. And so he has to name his number first, he has to play his card, and he has to play a card that he feels is a high probability third attempt make to stretch his competitors out of their comfort zone. I don't believe that either of these lifters had this much left in the tank, respectively, if Taylor had made the 320. And I'm not going to sit here and second guess what they decided on, but let's go ahead and take a look at the videos. And what we're going to do, so that I don't kind of spoil all the fun here, is we're going to show one by one what each competitor did, so not to spoil the fun. So Taylor Atwood did end up taking 323 kilos, and let's go ahead and dive in and watch this attempt, and then we're going to come back to the score sheet and update it to reflect what the other competitors now need based on the result of this lift. Okay, so Taylor Atwood is coming out for 323 kilos for his final deadlift, trying to push his lead and push his opposition out of the comfort zone. So he sets up, he starts to struggle to lock out, and he gets really, really tough there at the end, and it looks like he finally is able to push his hips through, but not a tidy deadlift. It was unclean, looked a little sketchy. Working our way back to our interactive score sheet, we now know that Taylor Atwood's final deadlift of 323 kilos, that's 712 pounds, was unsuccessful. That lift did not count. He received 3 red lights, so he was not able to go to the jury and protest that lift. For what it's worth, that was one of those 50-50 balls. At first blush, it didn't look to me like Taylor got his right knee locked, and then at the very end, it looked like he straightened everything out, finally got his knees locked, finally got his hips through. But quite frankly, and Taylor has recently admitted this on the King of the List podcast, he thought that the lift was sketchy. He thought that it was untidy, and did not necessarily argue or doesn't see fault with the referee's calls. That third squat, as we discussed earlier, is a different story. I think everybody looking at that lift thinks that it was good and that he was potentially, for lack of a better term, robbed of 7.5 kilos. That does not mean that he would have won the competition, and we'll get to that in our summary. But suffice it to say, he feels that his third deadlift was sketchy, that it was untidy, and therefore it did not meet the standard. And as I said, when you get a 3 red light lift, you cannot protest. You cannot go to the jury. So now Taylor is sitting on the same total. His total did not increase. So because Tim Monigatti is right behind him and has to pull next, Tim Monigatti and his team wisely settle on 324 kilos, which is the absolute minimum amount to overtake Taylor and temporarily put themselves in first place. Temporarily, that would move, with this attempt, it would move Tim's prognosis to first, temporarily, assuming that Tim makes this attempt, because as I said, he's heavier than Taylor, so he cannot tie Taylor. He has to matter-of-factly beat him. So Tim Monigatti and the New Zealand team settled on 324. Let's go ahead and take a look at that attempt, and then, like we did with Taylor's third, we will come back to the interactive score sheet and look at what Carl has to then do based on the result of this lift. So now, as the drama begins to unfold further, Tim Monigatti is settling in on 324.5 kilos. So this is about 715 pounds. This will be an IPF world record deadlift and will temporarily put him in the lead and overtake Taylor on total. So a very tough lift. The bar dips at lockout. Tim does not get the lights. Team New Zealand protests to the jury and gets the lift overturned in his favor. Going back into our interactive score sheet for the final time, we now know Tim Monigatti took his third deadlift at 324.5 kilos. That was a world record deadlift. It was very hard for Tim. The bar dipped kind of midway up or right at lockout. Looked like the bar dipped. What they're looking for is they're looking at the whole of the bar, which is defined as the center of the bar. As I always say, defer to the referees on the platform. They have the best seats in the house. They're sitting closer to the action than anybody else. The referees called the lift no good, 2-1, 2 red lights. Team New Zealand, the coaching staff, wisely ran to the jury table and protested the lift. And that's what you do on game-changing plays. That's not Bush League. That's advocating for your lifter. In Taylor's case, his lift received 3 red lights on the platform, and so he was unable to protest and just had to swallow that pill and finish on a 777.5 total. Tim's lift was turned down 2-1, and you're allowed to protest to the jury either way on 2-1 lifts, 2-1 good or 2-1 bad. And so his team wisely went over and protested, and that lift counted. So Tim is now temporarily in first place, which puts Taylor temporarily in second place, and Callie temporarily in third place. Well, certainly, based on the result of Tim's 324.5, Carl Arvidsson of Sweden, the game day coach, is going to call for 328, which is the absolute minimum amount to get to a 778 kilo total, to tie Tim Monigatti and beat him by virtue of the lighter body weight. So this is a very wise call. Definitely, based on how Carl's 320 looked, this is a deadlift that would be in the wheelhouse, so to speak. As I said, had Taylor made this lift, Carl would have needed 341 kilos, which, quite frankly, I do not believe he would have had 21 additional kilos after his second attempt, but that's just my opinion. So, having said that, let's dive back into the action and watch the climax of this competition in Carl Johansson's very last deadlift. Carl Johansson lining up for 328 kilos to overtake the opposition and to potentially have a stunning upset and win the competition, tying Tim Monigatti on body weight, and he's done it. A successful third deadlift, 3 white lights, absolutely smoked it, and he is overjoyed, as he should be. Taking a look at our final standings, we have one of the most stunning upsets in powerlifting history. Absolutely unbelievable. This competition had so much drama. Literally and figuratively, people were hanging off the edge of their seats on every lift. And what we see congratulations to Carl Johansson of Sweden, winning the Junior World Championships last year in 2022, and then, of course, being the IPF Open World Champion here in 2023, upsetting the GOAT, upsetting Taylor Atwood, the 74-kilo GOAT, in just a stunning performance. Can't say enough good things about Carl here. Executed at the highest level of the sport, going 9 for 9, making every single lift. I don't think any of his lifts had red lights, now that I really reflect on it. So just an exemplary performance. Rose to the occasion when it mattered, didn't blink in the face of adversity, wasn't concerned or worried about what the other lifters were doing. And so, a lot of green up there when we look at Carl's performance. And he should deserve all the credit for his execution and for his mindset and being able to go out and make lifts when it mattered. And we should also give a hat tip to his game day coach, Carol Arvidsson. As I said at the start of this analysis, she is one of the very best. I believe she's one of the top 3 game day coaches in the entire world. And so she made all the right calls, all the right decisions, the attempt changes, the calculus, helped her lifter and put Carl in position to shine and to be at his best. And that's exactly what he did. And let's not forget about Tim Monigatti, who placed second with the same exact total, only losing out to Carl on body weight. And look, Tim came down from 83 kilos last year, and quite frankly, has gotten stronger. I mean, he looks like a completely different lifter. Is now executed an 8 for 9 performance, and the only reason it was 8 for 9 was because he chose to pass his third bench press. And I don't know the behind the scenes conversation and what went into that. I mean, if he had taken 172.5, maybe he would have torched his back and, potentially, taking something off of his deadlift. But even if we add in that 2.5, we'd like to think that Carl had another 2.5 on that third deadlift. I mean, that third deadlift at 328 looked fast and it looked strong. And so anyway, but talking about Tim Monigatti placing second at an IPF Worlds and just losing out on body weight, what a fantastic performance for him, taking a world record squat, temporarily having the world record deadlift until Carl came back and took that. Neither of them achieved, we did not exceed the world record total, but that's not what this is about. Basically, they're booking their tickets to Sheffield. So Carl Johansson, by virtue of winning and being within 95% of the world record total, booked his ticket to Sheffield. And I believe Tim Monigatti, I'm not certain that he will be invited based on being a regional representative, because I think the regional representative from that region will be Kyota Ushiyama, the 66 kilo lifter from Japan. But having said all that, who wouldn't want to see a rematch of these three at Sheffield? So, I'll do my part to put in a plug for Tim Monigatti, and certainly let's try to bring the king back too. Let's not forget that Taylor Atwood came into this competition less than his normal capabilities, and none of that is said to throw shade at the other lifters, and none of that is said to diminish what they performed and what they did. So all the credit in the world goes to Carl Johansson, all of it. And just behind him, again, losing on body weight, Tim Monigatti. Those guys showed up and showed out. And so I'm not throwing any shade on them. All I'm saying is that Taylor showed up and put on a 7 for 9 performance, wasn't able to meet the standard on the third squat, which again, as I said, was extremely controversial. Looking back at that lift, I do think that lift was good. I don't see any reason why it was bad. I have no idea what the referees and the jury were looking at there. Apparently, they claimed that the knees were soft. And so, he potentially, he did lose 7.5 kilos off of his total. Now, that's not to say that had we, if we add 7.5 kilos back into Taylor's total, that puts him on a 785 total. Does that mean that the other two lifters wouldn't have been able to adjust their attempts and overtake Taylor? No, of course not. All it is to say is that Taylor would have had more and could have also adjusted accordingly. So it's purely speculative, and it's just Monday morning quarterbacking, if you will, to sit here and say shoulda, coulda, and woulda. The fact remains that it was an unfortunate situation. He did not get credit for the third attempt squat, which I think everybody universally, thinks that he should have gotten credit for that. And the last deadlift, he didn't get credit for that. And I think we can all agree that was sketchy at best. And so nobody's really crying over that as being spilled milk or anything like that. And so, at best, maybe Taylor's total would have been higher at 785. And as I said, the other lifters could have adjusted. So clearly Taylor was not at his best. He was vulnerable. And when you only make 7 out of 9 attempts, and Tim Monigatti makes 8, and Carl Johansson makes 9, you find yourself in the bronze medal position on the podium. And having said all of those things, taking all of that into consideration, it is still quite fascinating and rather amazing that Taylor only lost by 0.5 kilos, by 1.1 pounds, factoring all of that stuff in. But that's why they call it competition. The nominations don't always hold true to form. You have to fly across the world. You have to make weight. You have to compete and execute under the strictest judging in the world. And that's exactly what these lifters did. And I just want to say congratulations to Carl Johansson. It's very exciting for him, certainly exciting for Tim Monigatti. And, this is going to present new opportunities for those lifters. And all three of them go back to the drawing board and try to get better, because that's what powerlifters do. Do I think this is the end of the Taylor Atwood era? Certainly not. Do I think that he can come back and reclaim his throne? I do. We also know that there's, going to be some other lifters, coming through the pipeline that are going to be making some noise and be coming for the throne. But right now, right at this moment, Carl Johansson is your 2023 IPF World Champion. And if you want to get that title, all roads are going to have to go through him. And so I think it would be myopic to say that he's not going to fight tooth and nail to get back to this position next year, get stronger. His rate of adaptation is extraordinary. And so we can only assume that at this time next year, his total will be exceeding 800 kilos. And so that's fun. A high tide raises all boats. And that's good for Carl, and it's good for the other 74 kilo lifters as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this analysis. As usual, if you want more information on how I do things, check out my link below for the Game Day Coaching Manual. Give this video a like, share it. Feel free to drop a comment, and I really appreciate you watching. Until next time.